Before I start this video, I just want to put in a little disclaimer here that what you're going to see in the video are the thoughts and opinions of the content creator. And I'm the content creator, April DavisPI. Until any of these thoughts or opinions are proven or disproven by the NTSB, they are just that, thoughts and opinions. Watch and enjoy. Good afternoon. It's Monday, January 8th, 2024. And I'm here to talk today about the Boeing 737 MAX, the recent incident and some of the incidents ahead of that. You know, the one in Portland, Oregon, where the door plug actually blew out of the plane at 16,000 feet? Yeah, that happened January 6th. That plane was actually on its way to Southern California. And that's where I live. And the faux door, which wasn't acting as a door on that particular Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9, it blew out over Portland. About, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or so into the flight, the door blew out. And kudos to the female captain and her co-pilot who managed to turn that plane around quickly, get it down to 10,000 feet, and land that plane. Nobody died. Probably because nobody was seated in the two seats that were closest to where the door plug was. But can you imagine? You know, the plane just immediately depressurizes, and the flight attendants and the captain were making announcements over the PA, but nobody could hear them because the noise, the roar of the wind. One passenger said they could see the stars. Like, oh my God. You know, and this aircraft, just to back up a little bit, this aircraft has a very sad, tragic history. And the Boeing 737 MAX, they haven't been around that long. There's the MAX 8 and the MAX 9 that I know of. But in 2018, there was a Lion Air in Indonesia, and it was a MAX 8. And it crashed and it killed 189 people. And a short time later, in early 2019, March 2019, another 737 MAX 8 went down in Ethiopia with 157 fatalities. So, you know, the Indonesia was 189 fatalities, and the Ethiopian crash was 157. And that was only over, you know, like a 4 or 5 month period that happened. So, you know, they did some training, they made some changes. Boeing claimed that problem was gone. And then about a week ago, I think in one of the plants, they found a rudder that had a broken bolt. And then they put out a notice to the airlines, like, you need to inspect these bolts and the rudders. And there was at least one or two more that were found on existing aircraft that were already in service, where there was broken bolts or loose bolts in the rudder system. Like, you know, does that mean that the tail could fall off? That the rudder couldn't turn left or right, up or down? You know, with no navigation system, even with your engines, you know, intact, your plane is going to crash if you have no navigation. So this is a very serious thing. And I'm glad that Boeing put out that notice that they found the loose rudders, or the loose bolts in the rudders. I should correct myself. I don't think they were broken. They were loose. And that's a very serious issue. And then some of the inspections started, and sure enough, you know, they found out that this one plane that wasn't in service that had the issue, that there was one that was in service that had the issue, and now all these planes are being inspected and flights are being delayed and canceled. But, you know, safety first, people. And then only days later, this incident happens over Portland, Oregon. Now, there's several miracles here that nobody was killed. One of the passengers, a little boy, had his shirt sucked off his body. Several people lost their earbuds. 2 people lost their cell phones. The cushions that were on the seats closest to the door plug, they literally blew off. You can see it in the pictures where part of the seat that's closest to where it happened is missing. There's just like part of the seat is left, but the headrest and like the cushions, they're all gone. They just, got sucked out of the plane. And this is not a small hole. This is not the size of a window. This is a plug where a door would be. The airlines themselves can determine based on the size of the plane and the amount of passengers that they're going to carry and their seating arrangement as to whether or not they have to have a door behind those wings. And Alaska Airlines, for this particular aircraft, they don't carry above the maximum amount allowed, so therefore they don't have to have those doors back there. So they look like a door on the outside, but from the inside it just looks like a regular window with a panel around it. But it's more than just a window. It's an actual refrigerator-sized hole where a door would normally be. And there's a plant that's actually in Kansas where they assemble these fuselages and they put them on trains and they carry them to Renton, I'm not sure, Renton, Washington. There's a Boeing plant there that does the assembly, but the actual fuselage and these doors are manufactured in Kansas. So that would be very interesting, I think, to see trains going across the Midwest out to the west, crossing the Rocky Mountains. I don't know how they get around the Rockies, with these big fuselages on the trains, being carried to the Boeing factory in Washington, Washington State, that is. Very, very interesting how all this works. But, it's the manufacturer who makes the fuselage, but it's Boeing who assembles it and puts it together, and their name is on it. So if your name is on the company, you're responsible. And if you own that airline is responsible. It's just the way it is. And a miracle happened, and like a day later or so, they got a witness tip from a school teacher who teaches in Portland. I assume he lives in Portland or in the Portland area, and he found the plug in his backyard and took a photograph and sent it online to the NTSB, and sure enough, that's the missing part of the airplane. And not only did they find that, and then that door, by the way, didn't just landed in his backyard. Can you imagine if that thing came and landed on a house? I mean, I live near a large airport, and these planes are flying over me all the time. I guess it's a good thing I'm on the first floor and there's another floor above me, because can you imagine? I mean, I'm sure it would come right through the second floor to the first floor and kill me instantly if it were going to fly right over. But, that's scary that it just landed in a big city in someone's backyard and didn't kill somebody. It didn't land in the middle of the freeway or over an office building or a school or a park, a crowded, arena or stadium. It was just a miracle that it didn't land on anybody, and they found it. And since then, apparently they have found the 2 missing cell phones as well that got sucked out of the aircraft. And that's insane that they found them. It's a miracle. But this is pretty shocking stuff. First they had the crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia. Then about a week ago they had the loose bolts in the rudder system, which controls. That's the steering. That would be like if you were driving your car and your steering wheel is attached to your car and it's got a loose bolt, and your steering wheel might fall off while you're driving. You're going to crash. That's just the way it is. And then to find out that this rare, unheard of incident happens over Portland, Oregon, on the way to Southern California, and everybody survived. And the pilot, kudos to her again, she remained calm and cool, and she got that aircraft down quickly. Luckily, she wasn't too far away from the airport. But here's the big shocker of all this. It's now coming out in the investigation that Alaska Airlines knew that this plane had a potential pressurization problem. Apparently, this is a new plane. It was delivered from Boeing to Alaska Airlines on Halloween, October 31st, 2023. It was put into service on November the 11th. And that's a big day for me because that's when I started having my heart issue. That's a big day in my life right now until all this gets straightened out. November the 11th, the day my life changed forever. That was the day this plane was delivered, and it only had 145 flights under its belt when several of the pilots on prior flights had reported that a pressurization problem indicator light had been coming on in the cabin. And they had been, I guess the mechanics had been inspecting in between flights, and then they would just turn off the light and reset it for the next flight. But Alaska Airlines was aware of this, and they were so much aware of this that they had ordered that this plane, this particular aircraft, not fly over large bodies of water. Not their entire fleet, but just this particular aircraft was not allowed to take a flight to Hawaii because they didn't want that plane over a large body of water for fear that if something happened, that the pilots wouldn't be able to turn the plane around and land. Obviously, you're over the middle of the ocean. What are you going to do? And the fuselage is potentially disintegrating. Like, you don't want that to happen. That happened before, years ago, over Hawaii. So, they had made a decision not to fly that plane over water for fear that something may actually be wrong. And they couldn't find the problem, so they had decided to check the indicator light to see if they had a faulty lamp. But that was on their to-do list. I guess it was more important for them to fill those airplanes and fly those planes from city to city and just, hope and pray for the best that nothing happened. But something did happen. This is a new aircraft. There's a warning light coming on saying there's a problem with pressurization. And they're like, we'll check it later. We'll check, maybe we have a faulty lamp on a brand new aircraft. I mean, I guess it's possible. They could all be faulty. But it was this particular plane that I know of that had the indicator lights coming on. And so the airline said, no flights over large bodies of water, no flights to Hawaii for this particular aircraft. And days later, 16,000 feet above Portland, Oregon, the door blows off. Well, it's actually a plug for where a door would be. Alaska Airlines, as I stated earlier, they weren't required to have a door behind the wings for that size of aircraft, for that amount of passengers, and for that seating arrangement. So, they knew that there was a potential problem, but I guess profit was maybe more important to Alaska Airlines than safety. Safety first. I'm a PI, almost 40 years. Safety first. You always think about safety first, even when you're driving your car. Safety first. Well, now that this has happened, and these planes have been grounded, none of them are flying right now. It turns out Alaska Airlines and United Air owns the most of this particular aircraft, the Boeing 737 MAX 9. And just today, it has come out in the news that United, during their inspections, they have found loose bolts on the door plugs. So now we have the loose bolts in the rudder system that controls the steering of the aircraft. And days later, because of this accident that could have been prevented had they grounded that plane, and they found out that, there was something wrong, and it wasn't just a faulty indicator lamp. Now other aircraft, specifically United Airlines, they are finding loose bolts in the door plugs. Now the NTSB will have to investigate all of this. And apparently the black boxes, unless the plane crashes, the black boxes re-record themselves 24 hours later. And they didn't get to the black box on time, even though they knew where the plane was. The plane was sitting at the airport. They should have taken that black box out of that plane immediately. But they didn't. And they have lost all data on the black boxes. Apparently, every so many hours, the black boxes reset themselves. Now, if the plane crashed and the black box is just in a pile of rubble, I guess that doesn't happen. And then you could even record or retrieve the black box months later, even if it was at the bottom of an ocean, and you'd be able to get the data. But, I guess the black box thought the plane was still in service. Who knows? I don't work for Boeing. I don't work for NTSB. I have had a couple of plane crashes, and I had one helicopter crash, a very infamous one, and then I had a plane crash in my career involving a Navy Top Gun that was in a private aircraft. So I have done a few crash investigations in my career back in the 90s. I'm not an aviation expert, but if you look behind me and you see the TV, I'm watching the airplanes go by. Always had an interest in aviation. So to wrap this up, everybody beware of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 and 9. Alaska Airlines, I hope you're not found responsible for this. That plane should have been grounded because it wasn't just a false indicator light. They still have to do the investigation, of course, to determine the cause. I mean, the cause could be completely unrelated, but, kind of coincidence that the light came on multiple times. Pilots reported it multiple times. Mechanics inspected it multiple times. They couldn't find anything. So they decided, well, just for safety, we shouldn't fly that plane over water in case the worst happens. And days later, the door plug blows out of the aircraft. Any thoughts, people? Let me know. Bye.
It's nothing new, but it's so good to see you. We do this every day, and I'm still so amazed.